So e-learning personalization, 5 ways to personalize your next e-learning course. This is a topic that I started exploring last year. I attended several of the Articulate community events that Tom Coleman and the community team at Articulate hosted all over the country in Canada, and I had the great opportunity to travel to all of those and present on this topic. And over the year, and thank you so much, Melissa, on the slide design. And over this year, I've been exploring personalization, e-learning personalizations in a lot of different ways, and it's really shocking when you look at all of the different ways that you can incorporate personalization into your e-learning courses, either to increase engagement or just to make your course seem cooler or a little bit different from the regular everyday course. So, big question we have to answer. Well, what is e-learning personalization? And if you were to go out and Google this, which I did, there isn't a whole lot out there. There are a couple of blog posts that are starting to pop up every pop up on a few websites, whether it's on the Articulate community or a few other people's websites, but there isn't a whole lot of information on really e-learning personalization. So when I spent 5 minutes researching this topic the first time I gave this presentation, I really had to sit back and think about, well, what is personalization? And I realized that e-learning, or not e-learning personalization, but personalization in general is everywhere. Everything that we interact with in our everyday lives has some example of personalization, and it's something that when we talk about personalization as a design tool, you see it in marketing, you see it on the internet, you see it in things that you buy or technology that you buy, and industries, whether it's the technology industry or internet or marketing, they've been using personalization for years to help get you as a consumer more engaged with their product or their message or their marketing or whatever it might be. And there's examples everywhere. If you go on the internet is becoming more and more personalized to you as a user. Whether you're on a website and because you've been on that website before, because you've entered your name, you'll see that there are websites where it says "Hi Tim" or "Hi Melissa" or "Hi Jack" or whatever it might be. Those websites are showing your names, and sometimes with some websites, it's showing a picture of you, whether you're on Facebook or some other website where it actually it has your profile. That's an example of personalization. Um, Other examples are like you go to a news website and it does it automatically on the back end. It's curating content based on your interests. That's an example of personalization. Marketing personalization. I mean, how many times this happens to me every day. I will Google something. I will Google because I Google stuff all the time. I will Google the 2015 Nissan Murano because I'm looking for a new car. And then like not even minutes later I'll be on Facebook and there'll be ads for Nissan Muranos. And how creepy is that? But at the same time, it's kind of cool to think that, you know, somewhere on the back end it's collecting this data about me, and it's presenting information or content or marketing that is personalized to my interests. Now, some people don't like that because, well, it is creepy, but at the same time, I think it's pretty cool that we live in a day and age where I can Google something, and the internet, if you will, is going to try and present me other forms of content that match my interests. That's an example of personalization. Personalization is in our pockets. You think about smartphones nowadays, and there's so many different ways you can personalize that device. Everything from picking a color to changing the wallpaper to changing a ringtone to changing how the icons are organized. That device is uniquely designed at that point for you as an individual or a user of that device. We no longer live in days where it's a one size fits all type device. You can personalize it to make it more geared towards your needs rather than everybody's needs. This is kind of weird and morbid, but personalization is on our food. I know, M&M. They came out with this. They have a product, if you will, or a service where you can get M&Ms personalized with a picture and a name. That's crazy. I don't think I would ever do that, but I guess it has its purpose. Coca-Cola did a marketing campaign where you could personalize a bottle of Coke and send that to somebody, which is kind of cool. does it make the Coke taste better? I don't know, but it certainly makes the experience of having that product far more engaging otherwise. And Melissa says, I like personalizing my stickers or badges on Swarm. I hope they can do that learning badges someday. I totally agree with you. Personalization is now on our bodies. Did anyone get the new Apple Watch? I'm curious to know. Give me a green check. No? No. I am one of the sad people that got up at 2 in the morning, depending on your time zone, and pre-ordered my Apple Watch. And I love it, and I have it on my wrist, and it is personalized to me. I was able to personalize my band and get a different band. I was able to personalize the finish, and once you get your Apple Watch, you'd be amazed at how much you can personalize the actual watch face. And so my Apple Watch is personalized to me. That's an example of personalization. And Melissa says you can personalize magic bands at Disney World. Yes, they have bands that you wear, and it takes you to different, gives you access to things. You can personalize that. So personalization is literally everywhere. And one of the things that we do in the e-learning industry is we like to look at what is happening in the world or what makes things work in the world and figure out how to apply it to e-learning. Whether it's discovering that games is a really great way to engage students. Why don't we incorporate gaming into our e-learning in the form of gamification? Well, personalization is something that works really well in the world for engaging people. Why not incorporate personalization or the techniques of personalization into our learning? And we can do that. So going back to our original question, what is e-learning personalization? When I developed this presentation, I wasn't really able to find a clear definition. So what did I do? I made up my own. So e-learning personalization, according to me, involves the use of technology to tailor the presentation of content to match the preferences or needs of a specific user. It's all about taking what the user wants or their preferences, or sometimes more importantly, their learning needs, and personalizing the content, personalizing the look and feel, personalizing something about the course that's going to make them feel like, oh, hey, this is for me. One other example I was thinking of personalization, I was looking at this slide as I was just rambling on, and I noticed I used a handwritten font. How many of you have ever received one of those letters, and just put a green check, one of those letters from like Publishers Clearinghouse, or one of those credit card offers where it has their handwritten messaging on the front, and they say, oh, look, this is for you. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like the first time I saw that, I thought, oh my gosh, somebody actually, they have people sitting there highlighting and writing arrows, and I'm crazy from a design standpoint. I'm a really crazy person. So I would sit there with a magnifying glass and compare like two E's to see if they were exactly the same. I don't know if anyone else does that. I discovered that it really is just a handwritten font. So it really isn't personalized, but it makes you feel that way as a consumer. You think, oh, wow, this has been personalized to me, even though it really wasn't. Uh, so we know what personalization is. It's about tailoring the content. But of course, why does it matter? Why would we personalize content? And I've kind of talked about that. But personalization in terms of e-learning can do a lot of things to improve an overall learning experience. So personalization in e-learning can increase interaction. It gives you more opportunities to create different forms of interaction for the learner. Even if it is something as simple as selecting a character or typing in their name, it increases interaction. It's something other than just a click to reveal type of interaction that you might feel limited to. You can incorporate other forms of interactivity. It can increase engagement. Of course, if I take an e-learning course and I can type in my name, and then later the course reveals that name to me or uses that information in some manner, I'm going to be far more engaged. Not only in the learning content, but it's just kind of eye candy. You look at that and go, oh wow, that's so cool that it remembered my name. It gives it a sense of quality also. When something looks like somebody actually spent time building something, even though, for those of you that know how easy it is to have a user enter the name and then, bring that name up for them, it does give it additional sense of quality that it wouldn't have otherwise. So it can increase engagement. I might be more likely to pay attention to the course if something catches my eye or wows me or knocks my socks off even just a little bit. And then, of course, it can increase retention. If we personalize the learning content to the learner, whether it's based off their role or based off of their learning need or whatever it might be, they're going to be far more willing to listen to that information because it's about what they need, not what we think they need or what we're trying to make a one-size-fits-all learning experience. If we personalize it to their actual need, they're far more likely to go, hey, I need this content, so I'm going to pay attention. And that's an ongoing battle, is getting our learners to pay attention. So how does personalization work? How do we actually personalize an e-learning course? And one thing I've learned is that e-learning personalization can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. There are ways where you can incorporate personalization without having to do any tricky logic or using advanced features like variables or triggers or all sorts of stuff. You can incorporate really simple forms of personalization, which I'll show you. But we can also incorporate far more complicated examples of personalization where we are taking advantage of far more advanced features in our authoring tool to create a far more personalized e-learning experience. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. So e-learning personalization works by um, as we mentioned, either tailoring the content or tailoring something about the experience. And ways that I used to, when I was out in the field and I was creating e-learning for my students, is the way I would personalize the course. And what I was limited to was literally creating 3 separate courses for 3 different sets of users. And when I say that was personalized, maybe you have a set of learners that are managers and a set of learners that are directors, and then everyone else that are the employees. You'd have to create 3 separate courses if you wanted to personalize the same content to that type of role. And then you'd have to use the LMS to either make sure the right people got the right course. So personalization in that sense can be created just by creating multiple versions of the same course. Obviously, that takes more work, but that is a way of personalizing the content. It may not be the preferred way, but it is one way of doing it. The next way you can personalize content is you can personalize content within a single course through simple branching. So, you ask the user, pick A or B. Are you male or female? Are you a manager or are you a director? Or do you want to learn about this or that? And then from there, you branch them off into versions of that area of the course. They learn about stuff that's regarding the director role, or you're learning about stuff that's regarding the employee role, or it's representing you as a male in the course or you as a female, or whatever it might be. You can do that. It still requires you at that point to create 2 separate versions of the course, but it is still contained within one course. You run into different variables with doing that. If I'm a director, what happens if I accidentally click on the associate role? Or if I'm an associate, what happens if I click on the director side of that course? Who knows? You have to deal with those different variables. But that's a different way of personalization, is having a menu or something that is where the user picks something, and I'll show you different things you can have them pick, and then branching them off to that section of the course. We do this often when we here at Artists in eLearning, when we create translated courses. We will have a menu at the beginning that says pick your language, and you can then branch them off. And then I see Tammy, you raised your hand. Tammy, did you have a question? Nope, no problem, Tammy. All right. So you can personalize with one course by just doing branching. It's more contained, but it still requires to create multiple versions of the same thing. And then the third way of creating personalization is creating a menu. Same thing, creating a menu where you have multiple options, but then dynamically changing what's on the screen based off of what they chose earlier. So we ask the learners, pick a shape, a circle, a triangle, or a square. And it could be anything. You could pick a character, pick a role, pick a topic, whatever. Pick something. And then in the course, you dynamically change the content for the learner based off what they picked. And then that way, you have the entire course built, within one course, but you're dynamically changing the content to meet the needs of whatever they picked. And that's probably the more advanced way of creating personalization. And I'll show you examples of those as well. So with that being said, let me show you some examples. But before I do that, any questions, comments, thoughts about what I just covered? Or do you want to see the cool stuff, which is the examples of this in action? All right, well then let me show you examples. Let me exit out of my presentation here. So one of the simplest ways you can create personalization is, and this is just one example, is allowing the user to um, select a role. Whether you're work in a specific geographic location, you work in a specific office, you are a director, an employee, a manager, an employee, whatever. One of the easiest ways is to have them select a role. And here's an example. This is a really basic example on preventing harassment in the workplace for a fake company. And here at the beginning, we have a very simple menu. It says select your work location. Do you work in the main office or do you work in the warehouse? And I'm not using any fancy logic here. All I have is a course that is branching me to do two different areas based off what I select at the very beginning of the course. Now again, you have those variables that you run into. If I work at the warehouse, what happens if I accidentally select main office? Are you going to give the learner the option to go back and select the correct area? You have to deal with that on your own, obviously. But this is a very simple example. You work at the warehouse, you work at the main office. I don't know, let's say we work at the main office. I click that and then I can continue on in my course. And now it appears as if the content regarding preventing harassment in the workplace is geared towards me in the main office, because you might have different issues in the main office versus the warehouse. I don't know. That's up to you. And you can see that content is completely personalized. Now, if I were to refresh this and we start the course over again, and I can come here, maybe I work in the warehouse. Again, I can just select the warehouse and continue on. And it's not dynamically changing the content. It appears that way, but it's actually just branching off to another section, or if you're a storyline user, into a different scene of slides regarding preventing harassment. So that's a really, really basic and simple way of creating a sense of personalization. The important thing is that if you're going to do that, the content has to be different enough to warrant it. If the content is too similar, it's probably not worth your effort or development time of doing that. And I'll show you a real life example where I did this in action. The next way you can, this is just not, I'm not going to say it's the next way. Here's another way you can incorporate personalization into an e-learning course, is by allowing the user to enter their name. And this is something you can do in many authoring tools, and Storyline happens to be one of them. So here's a sample course on preventing identity theft. So as the user, when we talk about preventing identity theft, and this is a really good opportunity for using personalization, you think about identity theft, it's regarding your information or the user's information. You might want to incorporate personalization in a way that allows them to enter their name, and then you can use that as an opportunity to create a learning experience about protecting your information. So here's a course, Preventing Identity Theft, and right at the beginning it asks the learner, okay, well, tell us your name. So maybe my name is Tim, middle name is W, Slade, and I can continue on through my course. And once you get into the course, you'll notice a couple little things that are very nuanced, but I think it helps the learning. It helps enhance the learning experience. You'll notice it's using my name. Now, if I were to go back and change the name, it would update it. So it is dynamically changing the name. It's using variables and references and all sorts of cool advanced stuff to show me that name. But that's not the only way we're going to use that information in this example. So, the first section about this is learning how to recognize identity theft. So I can go into this section, and you'll notice we're talking about protecting your social security card. But again, something that's very nuanced, but I think makes a big impact or makes it kind of a wow factor. You look at the social security card, look, it has that information. It has what I actually entered in on the screen earlier before. And again, if I were to go back and change the name to something other than Tim W. Slade, it would update it here and it would show the user's name. From an end user's point of view, this is like magic to them. This is the stuff that makes the learner lean into the screen. And that's the kind of experiences you want to create with e-learning. You want people to lean in to the computer. I know that seems kind of weird, but really, when people lean into the computer, if they're leaning in towards the screen, they're really engaged with it. And Donna, I'll show you how I'll do this. I'll show you at the end, and we'll have some time and I can go into Storyline and show you how I do this. It's actually rather easy. So we have something really simple where we're displaying the user's name. That's one example. And then maybe once you get to the end of the course, it says, "Oh, congratulations, Tim. Click here to view your completion of certificate." And we click here. Oh, look, it's my certificate. It says, "Congratulations, Tim Slade." And it's in this cool handwritten font. That's cool. That's a wow factor. That makes me as a learner go, wow, somebody took time on this project to build this. So that's another example of personalization. And I see some people are typing, so I'll let you finish typing. Any questions about these examples? These first two really simple examples, whether you're personalizing the content based off a location or a role, or personalizing based off user information. And Donna, I'll show you how I created that in Storyline here in a moment. It's quite simple. And Melissa, I see you're typing, so I'll give you a moment. No problem. All right. Another way of e-learning personalization is and this is obviously more practical. It's not really a wow factor. It's a personalization out of a need, but you can personalize based off of language. So if you have users with multiple languages, you might need to personalize that content so that they can get the content and be able to read it. It's more practical, it's more important. It doesn't really enhance the learning experience. It makes the learning experience happen in the first place. If they can't read it, well, then there is no learning experience, obviously. So this is an example where the user can select a language. So, we'll go with English. And now we're going into our quiz. It's a pop culture trivia quiz, and it's presenting everything to me in English. Now, there's a lot of other things happening here. This might, you could call this gamification. It looks like a quiz game. We have some gamification elements happening here. But really what I want you to focus on is the language. It's allowing the user to select the language. Now, this is very similar to my first example where the user could select their role. There is nothing happening here from a logic standpoint that is personalizing this course for the sake of the language. All this is a menu that's taking the learner to 3 different areas. But the point here is that you have the option with these tools to personalize the language or to translate the course. Now, one thing I always have to suggest, and I know Tammy's on the call. I know Tammy has a lot of experience with translation. You don't want to use stuff like Google Translate to translate your course, which is what I did here because I don't know Russian and I didn't want to pay a Russian translator, but I have no idea what this says. It could totally mistranslate it, and that would be a bad thing because this could be a really naughty word. I have no idea. But you have this as an option, and so it says something, something, something in Russian, Pac-Man. And I think this is the answer. Yeah, I got it right. You might think I know how to read Russian, but I really don't. So you can personalize based off of language. More practical, less cool, but you never know when you might need that. Here's where we start getting into, and let me refresh this. Here's where we start getting into the more complex forms of e-learning personalization. And if we have time, I'll show you how we create this. There's a lot of great content on the Articulate forums or on the Articulate blogs right now about how to personalize by having the user select a character. And this is more cool factor versus being practical, but I think it does enhance the learning experience. So here's a very, very basic sample course on a stock market scenario, and it says, are you prepared to take the challenge? Accept the challenge, click a character to continue. So in this example, the user gets to select a character or an avatar that is going to represent them throughout their course. And they select this, and it is dynamically changing that character throughout the course. This is not an example of you're picking a character and then you're going to one of 4 different versions of that course showing a different character. This is actually dynamically changing the character on the screen. And Melissa says, not fun topic, so at least the characters are fun. Exactly. That's a really great point, Melissa. The personalization is one of those things that you can use to take a boring topic and make it more interesting by adding personalization or adding gamification, which is not what we're talking about today, but you can kind of do the same thing. You have a boring topic, make it interesting, allow the user to select a character or do something along those lines. So in this example, we could select a character. Maybe I'll select this guy here. And now when I go into the scenario, it is literally reflecting that character back to me, and it's representing me in the course. And that's really cool. Learners love that kind of stuff. That makes it seem far more advanced than a general, slide, and you click next to continue. This is the kind of stuff where your e-learning design no longer looks like PowerPoint slides wrapped in a player. This is where your e-learning starts looking more like an app or a program or something that was really custom built or polished, rather than just putting slides and then wrapping a player around it and adding a next button, which is something we're so used and accustomed to doing. So David asks, so how is that different from having 4 branches? Well, this is very different from having 4 branches. If we had 4 branches, I would have to create 4 versions of the course with 4 different characters. This is one course, and it's all one slide. It is literally changing the way the character looks on the screen based off what I selected, and I can show you how we did that if you want to understand um, uh, how I'm doing that. And that's a great point, Melissa. You could change the characters, different personalities, do different audio. Maybe you have different voice as well. So, and then, we can continue on, and it's showing a different character. This is different from a technical standpoint, David. This is different because we have, every slide that I take here is going to be the same slide. It's just going to have a different character, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So let me, I'm not going to resume. I'm going to refresh it, and just to prove to you that it is actually changing. I'm just going to open it up again. And David, I'll show you an example of, here in a moment, how you could create something like this without having all of the variables and the logic on the back end, and I'll show you why this is far more, this is much better to do rather than creating 4 versions of the same course. So you can see I just selected the character, and now it's showing her as the user goes through it. Now this is this last example. I call it it's like the piece de resistance. It's taking advantage of all of these different examples that I've been showing you, and it's incorporating a lot of different forms of personalization into one course. And this one is call center training. This is a call center training scenario. And thank you, Melissa. I think it's a good one too, and maybe it's because I created it. This is a call center training scenario, and in this one, if I click to begin, the first thing it asks us is, what's your name? Okay. So we click the name, and it does, Tim. And Amy says, and then the mouse over each character, hear the voice. Yes, I agree. Going back to what Melissa said, having different voices, that's totally cool. I think that's another form of personalization. I would love it till, the day where we could actually have the user record their name into the course. That would be really cool too. But then that would sound bad. It'd be like, welcome to this course, Tim, or something, but that would be cool. So in this example, I'm going off into a million different ideas, but in this example, it asks you to enter your name. That's one form of personalization. Continue on. Then it asks us to select a character. So maybe I'll be this guy here, and then continue on. And then another form of personalization is, what do you want to learn about? You have 3 different scenarios. Now, depending on how you set up your course, you might make the learner go through all 3 of these, but you're giving them a sense of control. Maybe the learner is struggling with billing questions, so they can come in here and learn about billing questions. And then maybe 6 months later, they're struggling with account closures, so they can come back here and learn about account closures. Again, it's about giving them control over their learning experience, with some boundaries, obviously, because you want them to make sure they get the right information, but giving them control of the learning experience and allowing them to personalize it to their needs. So we can select the billing question and continue on. Now, when I go through this course, it is going to be on the billing question. It's going to represent me, the picture I selected, or the avatar, and it's going to show my name, and it's going to use that information throughout my course. So let me show you what that looks like. So we can click begin. It shows me here. It says, hi, thanks for calling Compay. My name is Tim. How can I help you today? And then our customer comes in and she says, hi, Tim. It's using that information again. I just got my bill and there's a $50 service fee that the rep I spoke to said I wouldn't have to pay. And now we have a scenario. I can pick which answer I want to give to the learner. I don't know if this is personalization. I think right now, this right here is more gamification. It allows the user to select a response and explore cause and effect. What happens if I do this? When whenever I show this, I always like to piss off the customer. So we'll select, you probably misunderstood the guy, so there's not much I can do about it. Who'd you talk to? We'll select that. And you'll see she gets a little bit more orange. She's kind of mad. And then we continue on through the scenario. So we'll continue on. We get some feedback here. She asks another question. We get some more responses. Okay, we'll piss her off again. Oh, now she's getting red. She's really not liking this. So then we can continue. And then we get another response. We can pick this one, and now she is ready to speak to my manager. And yeah, she's gonna hang up and tweet about that company if she knows how to use Twitter, or she'll Facebook it to all of her old friends. So you can go through here, and it's an experience. Now, if I refresh this, I can go back through this, and if my name's Rosemary. I don't know. It could be whatever. And maybe this is Rosemary. And we'll do our billing question again. It's reflecting me. This is not a separate version of the course. It's the same version of the course. It's just changing the character and the name to match my selections, and it's using that information throughout the course. So these are some examples of personalization. Any other ideas of personalization that you guys might have? I haven't thought of any more lately, but I'm sure there are plenty others, so feel free to throw those into chat. But besides that, let me show you how I did some of this. We have some extra time. So I know, Donna, you wanted to see how did I have the user enter their name and later use that information in the course. So I will show you how to do that really quickly. Let me open up Storyline here. And then I also want to show you an example. There's another individual on the forums and on Twitter, on the Articulate forums, his name's Jeff Kortenbush. He took this example that I have up right here, and he demonstrated how you could do the same thing in PowerPoint. You might be using a PowerPoint conversion tool or a PowerPoint-based authoring tool, and in PowerPoint, you're obviously far more limited, but he was able to recreate this in PowerPoint, and I'd love to show that to you as well. But to answer your question, Donna, in Storyline, if you want to enter the user's name or have the user enter the name and recall that information later in the course, you can do that using something called a text entry field. So under the Insert tab, we have under Controls, there's text entry here. I'm going to do this really quickly, but this is being recorded so you can come back and get this. And this text entry field allows a user to type whatever they want. So I can put some default text here like type your name. And then maybe we have a new slide here. This is going to be later in the course. And it's going to reveal their name to them. And if I want to reveal that information back to them, I put something called a reference on the screen. So I put a text box and insert a reference. And I reference that text field that I created earlier, and it's going to show that information here. So let me show you what that looks like. So here, type in their name. My name is Tim Slade. And I continue on. And you can see it's showing that information here. If I go back and I change it to John Smith, it shows John Smith. So that's a really simple way of doing that in Storyline. It's just a matter of putting a text entry field and then referencing that text entry field later, which is in the form of a variable. But you can come back and watch that recording to see how to quickly do that. Amy, you said, I don't use Storyline, so I don't know if it's possible, but it would be cool if users could highlight specific bits of information that could be sent to a personalized notes page for them, where they can pick up the stuff that they want, need, print, save, review at the end. That's a great point. We're actually working on a project internally. Let me bring this up here. Excuse my messy email. Oh my gosh, why can't I spell Diane? There we go. And I'll just show you this example real quickly. Never mind that this is ugly. It's totally meant to be ugly. It's for an internal project. This is not the kind of content we create. But in this example, in this course, we ask the user to enter in a bunch of information. And then we have a summary page that shows the user their results here, and they can come reference this. Again, this is meant to be ugly. It's for kind of a experiment we're doing. So you can do that. And Melissa says you can do that in Captivate and Lector. And you can also print in JavaScript as well, which I agree with. So that's one form. Now, going back to the question, I believe, David, you asked this, with selecting the character, how is that different than a branched course? And let me show some things regarding that. So that one course, I'll just open up this one here, the combination one. Let me open this up in Storyline. Um, there are a lot of differences between just having a course branch to a different area that shows different information or a different character versus having it dynamically changed. And I'm going to show you how this that example, the call center training, was built in Storyline, and then I'll show you if you were not to use Storyline, if you were to use something like PowerPoint, how much more complicated it would be without having the advanced logic that you have available to you in Storyline. So this was built in Storyline 1, so that's why I'm using Storyline 1 for this. So in this course, we have these menu screens here. This was the first part where the user could enter their name, they could select a character, and then from here, what we have is, and this is the scenario part, this is the branching scenario. So you come to the first question, you answer this or this, and then you continue on. If you answer this one, you go over here, and you answer this or this, and you have some more branching. So you can see, here's the path that makes the customer happy. Here's the path that gets the customer, they're not satisfied, but they're not, ready to call your manager. And then here's the path where the customer is really, really upset, and then the final slide. So what I've done here is when the user selects a character on the screen, it's remembering what character they select in the form of a variable. And for those of you who aren't aware, variables are like, it's a way of creating a brain in Storyline to remember some sort of information. So if they select this guy, it remembers, we'll assign the number 1 to it. If they select this, it's going to store the number 1 in the background. If they select this lady, it's going to store number 2, and if they select this guy, it's going to store the number 3 in the background. And now that I have in that background, I have a mechanism storing and remembering which character they selected in the form of those numbers 1, 2, or 3. Now when I come to the actual content slides, each of these characters are stored in a state. You see, here's character 1, 2, and 3. And so what happens is, based off what they selected, they come to the slide, and then it changes. It instantly changes the state of this character to either one of these based off what they selected. So in the beginning slide, if they selected the third character, it's storing number 3. This slide is instantly changing the state of this character to the third state, which happens to be this guy when this slide starts. So this is a great time to mention that your decision to create this type of personalization, you have to decide whether it's worth your time, because this does take time. It does require you to do this sort of logic on every single screen. So if you're creating a really, really, 100-slide course, you have to decide whether or not it's worth your time to incorporate that level of complexity. There might be times where you go, no, it's really not worth it. And other times, maybe it's really boring content and you need to, I hate to say this, but jazz it up a little bit to add some different form of interactivity or a different wow factor. So you can do that. Now, I mentioned earlier, one of the guys in the forum, his name's, or in the Articulate forums, his name's Jeff Kortenbush. He's out of the Netherlands. And he saw this, and he really liked this example, and he took it and he rebuilt it in PowerPoint to show how could you do this in PowerPoint. And I can't even imagine how much time it took him to build this. And more power to him for doing it. And let me find it here. So he took the same example that I built in Storyline, and in Storyline I used variables and triggers and states to automatically change the state of the character. Now you can't do that in PowerPoint. You cannot do that. So what he did is he took this example and recreated the form of personalization that allows you to select a character. Now in PowerPoint, you can't allow the user to enter their name. There's just no way about that. But you can allow the user to select their character. So let me show you what this looks like first off, and then I will show you how much level of effort it would take to do this, creating 4 different versions of the same thing. So looks about the same. Here we can select a character. So maybe we select this guy, continue on. Select our billing question scenario. Here's that same profile page. And then we go into the scenario. Now, it's not using the name because we didn't have the option to enter in a name, but it is using a default name. And then we can continue on through the scenario. Same kind of thing that I just showed you a minute ago. What makes this really, really complicated, and even though it looks exactly the same, he literally had to create 4 different versions, or I think 3 different versions of the exact same scenario to show the 3 different characters. And you go, well, that's not too complicated. But when you think about 3 different versions of the same scenario, In each scenario, the customer asks a question and then you have two responses. And then the customer asks another question or a different question, and then they have two different responses. So there you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, you have so many different avenues. When you think about all of that, this is really complicated. So to create the exact same thing in Storyline, this took me a total of, let me look here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 slides. 13 slides in Storyline, and I probably could have done it in less. In PowerPoint, to do the same thing, it took Jeff 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 blah. It took him 84 slides to recreate the exact same thing without having the advantage of using logic and Storyline. So that shows you why you might want to use the features you have available to in Storyline, whether it's states, variables, triggers, all that great stuff, to create that sort of personalization. And yes, Amy, some days my life sounds like that as well. So with that being said, we have about 15 minutes left. So any questions, comments, thoughts before we end our free webinar today? That is the end of my formal presentation content. And of course, I have to plug this. We're doing Storyline training in May, but I mentioned that at the beginning. I see several of you are typing, so I'll give you guys a moment. Thanks so much, Amy. A lot of these examples, one thing I'll mention, a lot of these examples I've created and they're available. You can download. For free from the Articulate community. So a lot of these examples I've made available to download for free. So if you like those layouts, you can reuse them. And then Melissa, yes, I will bring back up the opening screen. You can answer whatever you like here. And thank you, Don. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Melissa. Or Melissa, formerly known as Rick. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for coming. This webinar is being recorded, so it'll be posted on our free webinars page down in the archive section. And you can always access it there. And then our next webinar will be in like a month or so, and I believe it is on gamification or something along those lines. Let me find out.